Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be found acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our refuge. Amen. Then he called the crowd along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Take up the cross. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German pastor and theologian who lived in that period when Germany was under the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler, leader of the Nazi Party. Bonhoeffer, who was subsequently imprisoned, wrote a book entitled The Cost of Discipleship. In that book, the author makes the following statement: when Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. End of quote. Reading the words of Jesus in today's passage from the Gospel according to St. Mark makes one thing very plain. Jesus never tried to win a following under false pretenses. In other words, he was upfront and honest about what it means to be his disciple or follower. There are times, when persons try to win over others by making grand promises or telling them of all the nice and pleasant things without mentioning anything else. It's only later, when one has bought into whatever is presented, that one discovers that the prospects aren't like they were presented, and one has been deceived. But that's not the way with Jesus. He makes it clear from the beginning that being his disciple involves denying self or forgetting self, taking up the cross, and following him. Today, I am very pleased, and I hope and trust that everyone in this congregation is as well, that we have just received 6 persons into membership and have witnessed their pledge to be faithful to Christ and the congregation. The reading for today is very appropriate, I think, on this occasion for these new members and all who would be disciples or followers of Jesus. We are told that Jesus began to teach his disciples about his suffering, rejection, death, and rising from the dead. But Peter apparently didn't think that such things should happen to Jesus, that such things should happen to his master. So we are told in the passage that Peter took Jesus aside and rebuked him. Maybe he thought Jesus shouldn't be speaking about such things. And that's the way it is with some people, my sisters and brothers. That is human nature. We don't often like to hear the hard stuff. And when it comes to the Christian life, there are those who prefer to think of the Christian life as something nice and comfortable, fuzzy, and always easygoing. Jesus uses the occasion to inform his disciples what following him involves. First, denying self. The self or ego can get in the way of true discipleship. Each person has interests, wishes, wants, goals, and aspirations. Usually, before committing to something, individuals like to know what is in this for me. How do I stand to benefit? What do I stand to gain? It is to this desire for self-fulfillment, for personal gain or advancement, that politicians and those who try to be popular and win others appeal. They appeal to that desire for self-fulfillment, for self-advancement. So Bonhoeffer was right. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. Die to self. Deny self. Forget self. Where one's interests and desires do not always come first, but they give way to what Christ desires or what Christ wants. It goes without saying, my friends, that many people don't find this appealing because we think of ourselves first. Our rights, our privileges, our needs, and these are the things that drive us, that motivate us. Self-denial then, or self-forgetfulness, is not a popular concept or approach, but it is one of the marks of Christ's followers and a necessary attitude for true discipleship. Take up their cross, Jesus says. The story is told of a politician who was making an appeal to constituents in a political rally. It was in a part of the country where the supply of electricity was very unreliable. And some people were still without it. According to the story, that politician, in an attempt to gather as much support as possible, promised to do certain things if elected. Typical politician. It is reported that on one occasion he even said, if you vote me in as your representative, I will make sure that all of you are electrocuted. Needless to say, he lost the election. Of course, my friends, he meant to say that if elected, he'd work to ensure that all had reliable electricity. But he misspoke. He said he would ensure that all were electrocuted, instead of that all had electricity in their homes. Jesus never misspoke. He never tried to impress others with fancy words or promises. Again, talk about a cross is not for popularity seekers, but Jesus wasn't trying to promote himself. He was about promoting the truth concerning God's kingdom. Taking up the cross is another way of saying that being a disciple of Jesus might lead to suffering and even death. When Jesus said this, he must have been thinking of the the Roman practice of marching prisoners through the streets, carrying the cross beam on their shoulders on the way to the place of execution. So there's a sense in which the politician was onto something when he said to the constituents they would be electrocuted. Because when Jesus said, take up the cross, he also had the possibility of execution in mind. For those who carried their cross would carry it to the place of execution, and all who witnessed it would know the kind of fate, the kind of end that such individuals would meet. And so, my sisters and brothers, Bonhoeffer is right. When Christ calls a man or a woman, he bids him or her come and die. To take up their cross reminds us that following Christ is not always going to be easy. It is not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be a bed of roses, my sisters and brothers. If you think being a follower of Christ is always going to be easy, then you're mistaken. Then you have not read the words of Jesus. Being one of his disciples can bring hardship or suffering and may even lead to death, since that's what the cross symbolizes. But as one Charles Spurgeon said, Charles, there are no crown wearers in heaven that were not cross bearers below. No crown wearers in heaven that were not cross bearers below. And so one of the great symbols of Christianity is the cross and the crown. Look for that symbol, the cross and the crown, because it reminds us that those who take up their cross in the cause of Christ will be rewarded with a crown of life. So, through suffering to victory. And finally, my friends, follow me, Jesus says. The word used here is really a military word. It's a commander's word. It is an appeal for total obedience, surrender, or commitment to the one who commands. When Jesus says, and follow me, he is inviting us to trust and listen to him. In other words, would-be disciples are called to imitate or model their life according to his. It is to be like Jesus, who submitted his will to God, who said, not my will, but thy will be done, who suffered, who was rejected, but remained obedient even to death. Discipleship involves a commitment to follow Jesus, come what may. It is to resolve to keep the word of Jesus, to be faithful to Jesus and do what he wants us to do, and go where he wants us to go, no matter the circumstances, no matter the conditions. It's a total commitment, as the pig said to the hen. A pig and a hen, sharing the same barnyard, heard about a church's program to feed the hungry. The pig and the hen discussed how they could help. The hen said, I've got it. We'll provide bacon and eggs for the church to feed the hungry. The pig thought about the suggestion and said, there's only one thing wrong with your bacon and eggs idea. For you, it only requires a contribution. But from me, it will mean total commitment. The ultimate sacrifice. Friends who were just received into membership today, and all of you who are members of this congregation and members of Christ Church, I pray that you will be disciples that not only make a contribution, but who are totally committed to Christ, so that nothing, no inconvenience, no criticism, no hardship, no fear, no feeling of rejection will ever cause you to give up on following where Christ leads you. May God bless you abundantly, and may you be a blessing to others. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.